What's up, everybody? In today's video, I wanted to discuss the book The Millionaire Next Door. It's written by Thomas J. Stanley and it also has a co-author, and both of the authors are professors. I listened to this book as an audiobook, similar to a lot of the other books that I've reviewed on here. And this book is basically a personal finance book. So it'll appeal to anybody that's interested in personal finance and saving. And the book is basically what the title says. It's Millionaire Next Door, like how to become a millionaire. It teaches you more how to become a millionaire from case studies and statistics. And the way I look at this book is it's a lot of statistics of what are the millionaires in the US, like what do they have in common. But the way I view this is you can take this with other books like Atomic Habits that I recently reviewed, and take these statistics and make them habits. Like these characteristics these people have, you can make them habits. It's really amazing, this book. Once I was listening to it, and I'm like, wow, every single thing in here is something you can implement in your own life. The reason I think that is because there's not one thing in this book that you can do that's really going to make you a millionaire. It's like these tiny little things. And the more I read of personal finance books, like Ramit Sethi's book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich, and Tony Robbins' book, Money Master the Game, and there's other personal finance books that I've read, and in conjunction with habit books, I realize it's compounding and small habits, and it's compounding of small habits that is going to get you to where you want to go. And in the case of money, it's not making a lot of income, it's not saving money. It's a combination of all those things, and it's like low expenses, and it's all those things, and that's what this book really highlights, because it just goes through all these characteristics. And I'll speak a little bit more specific to this book. So the way this book starts out, it defines what a wealthy person is. Like the title's a millionaire, but it's not necessarily millionaire in income. It says what really matters is wealth. And this book really proves it, because it tells you that it goes through high-income individuals, and a lot of those high-income individuals are living paycheck to paycheck. And so that's what this book tells you, is that just because you have a lot of income doesn't mean you're wealthy. And so it's like, okay, now that we've defined what wealthy is, let's go through how they got there. And it defines what wealthy is by, it uses acronyms, UAW and PAW and AAW, I think. And what they stand for is UAW is under accumulator of wealth, AAW is average accumulator of wealth, and PAW is prodigious accumulator of wealth, and that's the best you could be. It's like way past the metric of what you're supposed to be. And the metric is you're supposed to take your age times your income and then times 10%. And depending on where you are, if you're above, then you're prodigious. If you're kind of around it or a little bit below it, then you're average. But if you're like way below it, then you're under accumulator of wealth. And some of the key things this book says is like you have to be frugal, which basically means you can't spend a lot of money. In other words, it's very, very key that you spend less than you earn. And that's like spoken about throughout this book. Like the very wealthy people in this country do not spend all of their money, and they do not spend lavishly. They don't have nice houses, they don't have nice cars. The majority of them, they have simple lives, and you wouldn't even be able to tell it by looking at them. They don't shop it at like really nice department stores. It even talks about credit cards. This book is old also, like it was written in 1998 originally, so it talks about the type of credit cards you should have, or the wealthy people have, and it talks about wealthy people are more likely to have a Sears or JCPenney card. Not sure anybody goes to Sears or JCPenney because there's not that many of them that exist anymore. But it's like it's more common for them to have those type of cards than like a Brooks Brothers type of card. And then it goes into like other things as well, like that not the wealthy people, not all of them are they make high income. In fact, a lot of them don't. And then it says like you can be a prodigious accumulator of wealth if you make $30,000 or $70,000 a year, as long as you're saving money, which the frugal part is what they talk about. And then once you're saving money, you have to invest that money. And everybody says that now, like Ramit Sethi, all these people, Tony Robbins, you have to invest your money. And that's what this book talks about, is like investing your money, but it doesn't really go into specifics. It tells you the type of ways that people manage their money, the wealthy people. And it just tells you they spend a lot of time planning their investments. So it's like they go through their stock portfolio and pick which stocks they plan, and they spend more than the average person. Like let's say like 8 hours a month, where the normal person spends 3 hours or less. But that doesn't mean they're trading stocks and all this stuff, and that's what this book says. But now, since then, a lot of people have said the best thing to do, so you just don't screw yourself up, is invest in index funds and don't trade it. Like just invest in index funds, and over the long term, you're going to make more money. And so this book doesn't tell you that, but there's so much that's come out in personal finance since, especially with the FIRE movement, that, and that's what this book kind of confirms that, because it tells you that the wealthy people, they don't trade stocks all the time. They keep their investments for longer than a year, and they spend time just looking at their investments and planning it, which basically means like any money they save, they're investing it. They're not just letting it sit there with cash like a lot of people do. I do that myself sometimes too. And another key thing in this book is the concept of realized versus unrealized income. And it says these prodigious accumulators of wealth don't realize their income. They don't essentially have income from being an employee. And if they do, then they make sure that it doesn't get taxed. And it also talks about like the majority of extremely wealthy people are self-employed, which kind of like hit home for me, because as an employee, I feel like you're limited on your income, and that's how I feel. And you can't really make an impact on that. Even if you do a really great job, you can't really move the needle. And then also, like, income earners in the US are the highest taxed, right? Like if you keep it in the stock market, you keep it invested, then the US doesn't tax you until you sell your stocks or sell your investments. And that's what this book really keyed in on, that like the prodigious accumulators of wealth, they keep their money invested. They don't take it out and realize it. And they also aren't really employees. So that was a key takeaway. It's like, it might be risky to be self-employed, and this book talks about that. It's a risk, but it's also a risk to be tied to your job, especially if you're living paycheck to paycheck in that job, and then you lose that job. And this book goes through case studies specifically related to that, where this guy makes hundreds of thousands of dollars, but he was deadly worried that he was going to lose his job because he's living paycheck to paycheck, because he had a huge mortgage. He's trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to play status games. And that's something I've heard at other places too. Like Naval Ravikant in his podcast talks about status games and how nobody wins at status games. If you try and play status games through buying a fancy car, buying a big house, buying everything that other people have, Rolex, Rolls Royce, you're going to lose. You're never going to win that. Because let's say you do win the status game and people think you are the richest. Well, you lose because you're not wealthy. You don't have wealth. So that's my point, right? Like all these things, like you got to save. You have to save. You have to make sure you don't realize income. You can't spend a lot of money. And other things too, like it says, like if you're married, your spouse can't spend more money than you. You guys have to be on the same page. You have to budget. You have to know what you spend in each category. You have to track your expenses. You have to plan. You have to spend time planning your investments. Spend time planning your budget. And these are all like little habits that you can do. And not single one of them is going to get you to be a millionaire or wealthy. But the accumulation of all of these has a potential to make you a millionaire. And even Warren Buffett says it, right? Like he's like, people don't realize how easy it is to be rich. And you just have to, over time, you can be rich because of compounding interest, or just the compounding effect of putting more savings into your savings account and then investing that, and then the earnings and interest and dividends on those are eventually going to get you to become wealthy. And another thing too is trying to get as much of your pre-tax income into an investment fund without being taxed, and keeping it in there and keeping it invested. And then also another small habit in there is making sure you're invested in things with low expenses. So if you do choose an index fund, then low expenses, because if you're paying high expenses in those index funds and you have a lot of wealth, then you're going to be paying a lot of money in fees. And same goes to if you have your money in different places and you have to pay a financial advisor, then that's going to take away from your wealth. So it's all these all these little habits that are in this book that are really good, and I recommend you get this book. All these little habits that can add up and make you become a millionaire. So in summary, this book is really good for statistics and characteristics of millionaires in the US. But there's other places to go to get more specifics, like Ramit Sethi's book, I Will Teach You to Be Rich. And then another one that I recommend, especially if you have a job, is Mad Fientist. It's not a book, it's a website, and this guy is about the FIRE movement. But he tells you all these schemes to get as much money, to get as much of your pre-tax money into an investment account, like a 401k or a traditional IRA. And then if you want to get it out earlier than your retirement, then he tells you like all these schemes that you can do. But also just like you want to get as much money pre-tax into investment accounts as possible so that it can grow. But don't worry about getting it out, because there's plenty of plans that he has to get it out of there earlier. But those are some specific websites that I recommend that provide a little bit more updated information than this book. But as far as drilling down on all the characteristics of the wealthy people, like looking behind the curtain or the door of the wealthiest people in America, this is the book. This guy has so many statistics in here. You're not going to get better information, and it's really going to challenge your assumptions. After you read this book, you're going to want to save as much money as possible. You're going to want to invest as much money as possible, and you're going to want to spend more time on your finances. So go ahead and get this book, and like this video if you like the content, and subscribe to get more of my book reviews and recommendations. Thanks for watching.